Welcome to another episode of The Journey, and today I'm talking to talented athlete and physiotherapist, winner of the last 3 Nail Can Hill runs, Patrick Stow, and he's packed in a lot in his 28 years. Let's discover his journey. Patrick, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me on. This will be good fun.
It will be. Now, first off, though, we probably got to establish the name situation here because, like my name in full, Matthew, I only get talked to like that by my mum if I'm in trouble. So what's the situation with Patrick? Where do we stand?
Yeah, so similar sort of boat. It's Patrick from mum. As I've gotten older, I've become a little bit more comfortable with introducing myself as Patrick, but I mainly go by Paddy.
Paddy with a D.
Yep.
All right. We'll run with that today, I reckon. All right. Well, as we do every time with The Journey, we'd like to establish your connection with the area. So yours goes right back to birth.
Yes, it does. So I grew up on a hobby farm out in Cancuna, which is situated between Mount Beauty and Dedarang. If you drew a triangle between Mount Beauty, Dedarang and Myrtleford, Cancuna's a little valley that's tucked away in there.
God's country out there. It is just the most glorious part of the world.
Legitimately God's country. And so I would commute on the school bus into school, both for primary and high school, about 60 minutes both ways every day. But yeah, grew up on a small farm, about 50 acres, and just lived an awesome childhood.
Oh, man, that does sound like a dream for so many people. What kind of animals and what kind of general farming did your parents do?
So funnily enough, it was general farming. Like mum and dad both had some cattle and some sheep and some horses. But the actual farm was set up as a deer farm. So
nice.
there were paddocks that had sort of the 6 to 8 foot high fencing with the squared sort of wire. We didn't farm deer, but deer would often frequent the paddocks.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Well, that's good fortune. Yeah. All right. So you had this wonderful childhood and you're out at a beautiful farm in God's country. What did you expect out of your life as you were kind of growing up? What did you gravitate towards?
Yeah, so I guess my childhood was interesting because I grew up in an area where there was no phone reception. The way for us to get TV, it was satellite TV. So our channels came from the Northern Territory. We didn't get the local
Really?
we didn't get the local news or anything like that. And it was kind of a privilege to come into town outside of school hours. So I had an amazing childhood, and I thoroughly enjoyed growing up out there on the farm. What did I expect? Well, I didn't think that I would ever sort of move to a metropolitan area, just because I grew up in an area where I had a lot of my own space and free time and ability to do essentially whatever I wanted. So I was always drawn to staying within a regional location. Yeah.
Yeah. So was Wodonga the city? I mean, was that, or Albury Wodonga generally, but I mean, was that kind of the big metro area for you, or did you go to Melbourne much, for example?
We'd travel to Melbourne just to see family and that sort of thing, but definitely Wodonga was in town. That's how we sort of described it. And, we're going in town for the day, or your mates from in town were coming out to the farm. And I mean, we didn't live on a farm by any stretch in comparison to those that were surrounding us. And if you go further into, like, say, the Southern Riverina area. However, yeah, town or the city was definitely Albury Wodonga, and then you go to Melbourne and it'd be a bit of a shock to the system.
Yes.
But yeah, just really, really loved growing up where we did, and incredibly fortunate that we were able to do so.
Yeah, it does sound absolutely idyllic. All right, a lot of country kids, obviously, they do gravitate towards sport, and footy obviously is massive in our part of the world, and that's certainly where you kind of ended up.
Yeah, so footy was an interesting one because I played most of my junior footy out at the Dedarang Mount Beauty Footy Club, and like all sort of small communities, the football and netball clubs are the heart and soul of the place. So spent many an hour playing football. My siblings played netball and football. Football wasn't the first sport I played. I had to spend a season playing netball.
Did you?
Yeah, Mum wouldn't let me play footy. I'm a pretty small dude, but when I was little, I was even smaller. And Mum, being a nurse, she'd seen too many kids come through ED, and because the smallest grade at that time was under 14s, she's like, I'm not letting a 9-year-old go and play footy. So I had to don the footy shorts but wore a bib and had to play a little bit of netball, and I've never lived it down. But I think that probably aided me in my ability to possess a few skills that other people probably didn't.
Yeah. As you said, you're not the biggest bloke.
Yep.
I'm sure you don't mind because it benefits you now as a runner. You don't want to be too huge as a runner. And it is pretty tough playing footy. Especially bush footy.
Yeah.
People don't hold back.
Yeah.
So as you got a little bit older and moved beyond netball, how did you go playing against the bigger blokes?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty competitive person, so I thrived on the contest, and going out and challenging yourself against the bigger bodies was something that I really enjoyed. Like most kids do when they've got a little bit of talent, they tend to play senior football a little bit earlier. So I think I played senior football at Dedarang when I was 16. And then I actually moved in to play football at Wodonga with the Bulldogs the following year as a bottom age player in the thirds, and only spent 1 year in the thirds and came runner-up in the league medal, and then played senior football the following year as a 17-year-old. So it probably didn't help me later on in my football journey to begin playing against grown men in the crash and bash sort of country footy that we have here. But yeah, I thrived off the contest, and really enjoyed sort of being at the bottom of the packs. It was good fun.
Yeah, well, at that stage of life, 16, 17, you're looking towards the future as well. Were you academic at that time, or were you thinking maybe even making a career out of footy?
I was never really good enough to make a career out of football. I probably had a dream, like a lot of kids do, that you want to play AFL and be running out on the MCG. I was relatively academic at that stage in my life, but also was probably gifted that I didn't necessarily have to try too hard. So probably through the years of year 10 and 11, just sort of scraped through on the back of being, having some sort of natural intelligence. I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to undertake some form of tertiary study. I just wasn't drawn necessarily straight towards something in particular. So, would play footy and was taking it relatively seriously, like, did the Murray Bushrangers pre-seasons and all those sorts of things, but just wasn't probably willing to commit myself fully to football, although it was a big part of my life. I just more enjoyed the camaraderie with your mates and that sort of thing on trainings and on the weekends.
And I think as soon as you have even that tiny little bit of doubt or for want of a better term, lack of commitment, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but as soon as you don't have that laser focus, you pretty much then said the AFL is out. Because those kids that make it to the AFL, they are just laser focused generally.
1,000%. I couldn't agree more. And I guess the difficulty attached to that is obviously growing up in a regional location. You have to be even more laser focused because the opportunities that present themselves are limited in comparison to those that may grow up in a metropolitan area. So probably 15, 16, AFL was the dream. And then you come to the realisation, when you get cut from a squad or, you have a few bad games and kids are bigger than you and you don't have that X factor as such. I'm a realist. I knew that probably wasn't going to be the case. I wanted to get the best out of myself in that space. And I think that I probably did. But yeah, I wasn't laser focused on football by any means.
Yeah, but we're working our way towards probably what I would suggest would be your true love. Like you've found your love now, which is long distance running, but we're working our way towards that. I reckon there would have been at least a few signs there that it was an area that you'd like to pursue. Did you like doing laps at training, for example? Or did you like running your butt off during games and people would just go, man, that kid, he just never stops running? Well,
there was probably an element of, again, natural ability with the distance running thing. Dad was always very aerobically fit. He was in the Defence Force for a long time, and I remember him he always had a little brag that he had like the 2.4 kilometre record at the army base, which is a run that they have to do quite frequently when you're within the Defence Force. I love to run, and I guess it was probably something being smaller that you couldn't really be contested football all the time. You had to get on the outside and run a fair bit. So I did love running at training. I did enjoy, in primary school particularly, like the cross country and the athletics carnivals and that sort of thing. And then when you get to sort of year 7 and 8, running's not very cool. So didn't go to the athletics carnivals or anything like that anymore. But yeah, I did like to run, and I probably did have a bit of aerobic talent, like, would win the 3K time trial at the Bushies or win the beep test and that sort of thing. But back then particularly never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah. You did the traditional thing that a lot of people do. You went to the big city, and so you studied down there, right? So
Yep.
So you went to university in Melbourne?
Correct, yep. So 2013 was when I graduated high school. I was in Thailand for schoolies when I got the message through regarding ATAR results. I was probably in two minds prior to that, whether to have a gap year or to go to university. And at that stage, I was probably thinking of actually going to Deakin in Geelong and doing, some form of exercise science or something like that. So when I got my ATAR result, and it was far better than I thought it was going to be, it opened up a few more doors. And it's probably remiss of me, but I jumped into a degree at Monash probably a bit too soon without thinking about it too much. Had the draw of getting to live with my best mate as fresh 18-year-olds down in the city. So
I can imagine.
Yeah, we made the most of the social side of things for sure, but made the move down to the city and realised relatively quickly that it wasn't really for me. Was able to meet a lot of people and experience a lot of things, which was really awesome. But going from, living in a valley where there's probably 60 people, no phone reception, to smack bang in the middle of Melbourne, surrounded by, millions of people, it was a bit of a reality check and made me grow up pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's funny. I went to uni as an adult entry, so I was 21, I think, at the time when I went back to uni, maybe even a little bit older. Yeah, I was 25 when I went back to uni. And I remember in the first year just looking at all these kids, straight out of school, and they were just partying and just not concentrating on, or half of them would go, I don't even know if this is a course I should be doing. And I kind of thought in my mind, this is a great way for unis to make money, like just get these kids who only do a year or two and then decide that they're not even in the right course. Meanwhile, they've paid X amount of thousands of dollars. I'm a big fan of maybe taking a year or two out. Like I did a few more years, and then you know exactly what you want to do when you go back to uni.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I guess at the end of the day, that's essentially what I did do. So spent the 12 months down in Melbourne. I was studying a double degree at Monash, health science and business. As I said, absolutely hated it. I enjoyed the social side and met some awesome people. However, just wasn't enjoying the actual location. And same sort of thing, financial burden. There's obviously a mental health burden as well that you probably weren't really aware of until you would come back home and spend the weekend or a week during like a uni break at home and go, is it even really what I want to be doing? But as you've said and you've touched on, you're racking up some student debt, and you had to pay rent, etc. in the city. So would go back. But in January sort of the following year, 2015, I sort of sat down with my old man and said, look, I've been offered this little financial bursary from the University of the Sunshine Coast. It's to continue studying the same degree, maybe a change in location. Could potentially be something that changes, my happiness towards the whole situation. And he said, look, why not? Just go and have a crack. You're 19 years old now. And if you don't like it, you can come back. So that's what I did. I drove my little 1995 Toyota Corolla from home up to the Sunshine Coast. No aircon, no power steering, no Bluetooth. Windows down. And then just spent the next 6 months up there on the Sunshine Coast, which again didn't necessarily change my love towards the academic side of things, but the actual experience was amazing.
Yeah, and at that stage, did you think that you were going to end up back here, or was that always part of the plan, or at that stage was it like I could end up anywhere?
Well, there was probably parts of me that thought, I could end up anywhere, and you want to be that sort of person where you're not completely locked into one thing at a given time. But at the same, like in retrospect, I probably knew that I was always going to come back. It was just a matter of when. And we'll touch on it in a little bit, but having done those things and the experiences that I've gained, it's been more than advantageous that I did those things. Yes, they didn't work out, but they've held me in better stead moving forward now. So at the back of my mind, I probably always wanted to come back, at least to the Albury-Wodonga region, not necessarily to Cancuna. But yeah, at the end of the day, we did come back, and I've loved it ever since.
Yeah. So you're up at the sunny coast.
Mm-hmm.
What did you say, about 2015?
Yeah.
That was. So what year did you get your way back here?
So it was the middle of 2015. So I did the first semester up there on the Sunshine Coast. And I was playing a little bit of footy up there, and I was actually playing quite good footy because during my time in Melbourne, I played at Blackburn, but I was doing too much beer drinking and hanging out with mates. I'd occasionally go to a Thursday night training. Otherwise, I just wouldn't go and just rock up on the Saturday. And, would get a kick and everything, and that would all be well and good. But if you wanted to sort of push towards making it, a name for yourself or really bettering yourself, I definitely wasn't doing the right thing. So, middle of 2015, so in June, I ended up coming back and just sort of spent 3 weeks at home decompressing from everything. It had been not a whirlwind 18 months, but it had been a very different 18 months. And I guess just before I turned 20, I was sort of like, okay, I don't necessarily need to make decisions that are going to shape my life, but I need to have some sort of plan moving forward. And I guess the plan was to not have a plan and to do some work and get some actual adult life experience before then diving back into whether it was a tertiary experience or undertaking an apprenticeship or just working. So the middle of 2015, that winter period was probably a game changer for me and the trajectory of what I've done with my life since.
Yeah. So you're a trained physiotherapist.
Yep.
You're at Health Focus. So did you then go to uni locally?
Yeah. So,
CSU or Latrobe?
Yeah, CSU.
Yep.
So CSU and Thaguna was where I went, and I didn't start studying until 2018. So there was a period between the middle of 2015 to 2018 where I did a bunch of different things. Most commonly working, predominantly spent my time at Bunnings Warehouse stacking some shelves.
That's good though.
Yeah,
you need to do that kind of thing.
And that was out of my comfort zone because it required me to learn about things that I had absolutely no knowledge of previously. And then, did some travel, went overseas. I had my best two mates, Ruggles and Mitch, and we started a business. We had a mobile caravan bar and we did weddings and that sort of thing. So although still young in my life, just was able to pack these experiences on top of one another, which only held me in good stead moving forward.
Let me ask you a question. So I've always wondered this. It seems on the outside to be virtually impossible that you could know every single thing at Bunnings. So when you go up to a Bunnings person and you go, where are your nails? And they know exactly where it is. How long does it take to learn? And did you legitimately know where everything was?
Look, I knew where most things were. I was pretty good. You'd come in and you'd say, look, where are the nails? And potentially there's people listening to this now who the Wodonga store may have changed since I've ceased working there. However, you'd be like, aisle 7, you can go down there. Aisle 5 are where the screws are, etc. Down the front to the left. But my favourite thing about working at Bunnings is because legitimately the first 6 months I had no idea. I had no idea. Like, Bunnings are really good with training you, but you don't necessarily get the product detail. And
Which
I remember,
is understandable.
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many products.
Heaps. And I remember just talking to a lady one day who was buying some outdoor furniture. I just happened to be walking past, asked if she needed a hand. And she looked at me in amazement as I riddled off all these features of the outdoor setting. I was just reading what was on the box straight in front of her. And I thought, you know what, I could probably get away with this. And I used to test myself a little bit with people and just sort of see, how much I could get away with just looking out of the corner of my eye and reading different details and comparing products. A little game amongst myself, but it was good fun.
All right, so you've done a few years of that. And again, it seems like we have a similar mentality towards work and study, because I genuinely feel like doing jobs like that, get out and deal with people and sort your mind out. And then you kind of you take advantage of the study more, I feel. And you kind of like, right, I'm really going to take advantage of it. So you did physiotherapy. Was it straight physiotherapy at CSU? Mm-hmm. And then the seeds of the running must have definitely popped into your mind then, because, talk me through how you ended up going, you know what? I, as well as being a physiotherapist, I want to focus on long distance running.
Yeah. So, they tie in really well together. There are a lot of physiotherapists who are also runners, and most physios, particularly those like myself who are in private practice and have a musculoskeletal focus, we tend to keep ourselves fit and in shape, and running's probably that sport which is the easiest to do to ensure that occurs. So running for me really started in 2018. I was still playing football, but we just got back from a footy trip up in Cairns, and one of my good mates, Cosmo, dragged me along to the park run here in Albury. And to be completely honest, I didn't know what park run was then. And he just said, it's a 5K run. You can come on down and have a bit of a crack. So we went down together the week after the footy trip. So probably still carrying a few demons from up there in Cairns. And we went down, and I just couldn't believe how many people were present at this event. I think there would have been about 250 people, a free 5-kilometre run. It's all timed. So we undertook that and, had my ego checked pretty quickly. I thought I was a relatively fit young guy. In the last 500 metres, I had a bloke with who was pushing a pram with 2 kids in it. He came past me.
Get out.
Yeah. So
it's a reality check right there.
Yeah, I did the classic football thing and just went out as hard as you possibly could and then just died a slow death. So that's what drew me back to running was the work that you put in, the result you get directly from that. And that was probably different to football because you're reliant on a team component, and being super, super competitive and not playing at a super high level, I probably wanted those around me to work as hard as I did. And that doesn't necessarily translate to good performance because you get frustrated with the lack of work that they deem to be putting in, or you may deem they're putting in. But at the same time, they're there to have fun. They really don't care that you go do a couple of laps after training, or you spend an extra half an hour in the gym, or whatever it was. So the thing that drew me to long distance running in particular was you get out what you put in, and it's a slow burn. So if you stay consistent over time, you're only going to continue to progress. So that's what I did.
Yeah. And then once you completed that first one, did it just get hooked? I mean, then did you just go, right, okay, this is a challenge for me for the next time. But when did you really, really get hooked on it and then go nuts?
It probably was a 6-month period of going down to the park run every once a fortnight, and really nailing yourself, and trying to see how much you could squeeze out of the sponge, so to speak. So it was probably 6 months of, I'd run once or twice during the week and then go down and do this 5K effort as hard as I possibly could. And when I sort of stopped progressing in terms of time, that's when I thought, maybe I can actually do a little bit more with my training and become a better athlete. This was probably at the same time that Ashley Hoffman, who's a local distance runner who's done a lot of trail running and is a marathoner himself, he kind of approached me and said, look, I can obviously see that you've got a little bit of talent and you're willing to work hard. I'm happy to sort of guide you, because at the time I'd already signed up to do the marathon in November that year. So he said, once you get back from the marathon and you've recovered at the beginning of 2020, let's work together and see what you'd like to do. There's no obligation to stay on for a particular period of time. Just all I ask for is a 3-month commitment just to see, so you can see the progress, and we'll go from there. So it was probably the middle of 2019 when I was hooked on running, but it was really the beginning of 2020 when I started to take it pretty seriously.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was going to ask you, the kind of perception of it, of long distance stuff, especially, is that it's all on you. It's all about you, and I can't visualize watching or hearing about anyone training with other people with long distance. So, but I'm sure it's critically important, as you've just said there. Yeah. So, how important has help been to you and experience and coaching?
Oh, a huge amount. I mean, the number one thing that's going to cause injury is if you do too much load, and the coach's job is to ensure that you don't do too much load. So the programming of sessions and what days you're going to do particular types of runs, yes, that's important, but the overall managing of load is the main thing which is going to keep you injury-free. If you're injury-free, you're consistent. Consistency is key. So particularly with running where, as I said before, it's a slow burn. The more miles you can string together, the better athlete you're going to become. Unfortunately, it's sort of hit and miss with the ability to train specific sessions with people in the local area. There's an ample amount of people who are willing to jump in and out of different sessions, particularly the longer stuff, which is amazing. But we probably lack that sort of group environment, whereas if you went to Melbourne, there would be 20 guys who I'd be able to train with, every single day.
Yeah.
So it's the coaching side of things and the access to the wealth of knowledge, not only from Ashley, but, for instance, Pat Scammell, who I've had many a discussion with, and local guys like Matthew Doré, who does some running, and Jeremy Ray. These guys just offer a wealth of experience that has shaped my ability to become a better athlete. Because you do spend a lot of time alone, but there is a team of supporters around you.
Yeah, yeah. So someone like a Steve Monaghetti or a Olympic athlete, generally, someone of that caliber, I mean, would Steve have had, say, one coach during that whole period? Like, are there coaching teams like there are with, say, tennis, where you famously get a coach of a particular person and they stay with them?
Yeah, I mean, Steve had a couple of different coaches throughout his career, and it's probably based on phases. Once you begin to stop progressing, you probably look to find a different coach to ensure that, is there a different system that we can train, or is there a different way of training? I mean, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, and there's the same thing with distance running. As long as you're able to stack the mileage on top of week after week, you're going to see results. So it's not, you get coached by one person and you're stuck with them forever. There's chances to seek help from other people, but it's probably not that type of thing where you have. Now there's this new movement of strength coaching, and I've got a strength coach, and I mean, as a physio, I have a pretty good understanding of strength training myself. But there's probably really only a strength coach and then your running coach that are the two people you tend to lean on. But yeah, it's probably something in the future which Ash and I will discuss, is whether or not we continue on the same trajectory or we look to find someone else to get new input. But I mean, there's a team of people around who are more than willing to share their experience, which has been really helpful.
Yeah, yeah. So you were saying you did your first marathon in 2019. Now, I mean, long distance running is, I think, one of those things where for a lot of us, I mean, it's just impossible to get our head around. I mean, if someone told me that I had to run to the bottom of the street 500 metres, I'd be stuffed. I'd be at the end of it, I hate that, So what is it you love about long distance running, and is there something in the body that just starts to thrive on it?
Yeah, it's a good question, because 99% of people would have the same point of view as you, and I think it stems from, particularly if you play team sports, running's always the punishment. You stuff a drill at football, all right, you're running laps. If something happens on the soccer field, all right, boys, Indian file. So running is always deemed the punishment. And I guess there's probably an element that I do like to punish myself, hence the draw towards distance running. First and foremost, probably, and I guess it's kind of a buzzword now, but the flow state is probably something that I experienced, particularly when I understood what easy running looked like versus, going out and smashing yourself every single run. So that would be one feeling that you get, the ease that it puts at your mind, particularly when you have a relatively busy mind like mine, is the main sort of benefit that I get from it.
Am I right in saying that there's a weird mental thing with long distance running? From what I pick up, it seems like the benefit is at least as much mental as it is physical.
100%. And I think not only the benefit, but the ability to perform is at least the same mentally as it is physically. There would be people in the Albury-Wodonga region who would be far more physically attuned to running long distances and would probably be better long distance athletes than me, but they would probably lack the mental drive to, one, go out and do the training, and two, when the going gets tough, actually switch in and go, I want to open the oven door and jump in, let's go.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's benefits just as mentally as there are physically, but there's also challenges mentally just as there are physically.
Yeah, yeah. So you've gotten the bug at this stage, obviously around 2018 into 2019, you do your first marathon. That's what is it, 42?
Yeah, smidge over 42.195.
So from a park run
yep.
to a marathon in only a few years.
Well, yeah, not even. It was within that year. So it's quite funny. The first park run I did, my marathon the following year was a quicker pace than I did that park run in.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
How was it? Like you've only done, so you're coming up to your third marathon. So I mean, it is still relatively new for you, obviously. Yeah. What did it feel like?
I probably took the experience for granted a little bit. I did the New York Marathon as a ambassador for Movember, which was helped set up through some connections at the university. Having been a little bit of an older student at that time versus my classmates, and having discussions with different lecturers and then people in the community, they could see that what I wanted to do with not only my physiotherapy sort of career, but what I wanted to do in that space at the time. So I did the Movember Marathon, New York City. You run through the 5 boroughs. It absolutely incredible. The atmosphere was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. They had over 3 million people on the streets, 52,326 finishes that day. So you rock up and, you go from the Albury Park Run, so to speak, and there's 200 people. And, you've got the size of Albury on the start line at this major race. The feeling was it was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah. And then, unfortunately, COVID hits the year after.
Yep.
So that throws all your plans. I'm sure you had other plans, irons in the fire, and that was gone, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess the COVID probably helped at that stage in distance running, because it allowed me to put together constant and consistent weeks of training. So the ability to progress, and you progress from your races, particularly when you're attempting to compete at a higher level. So it probably was a good thing that I was able to train the entire way through, and obviously there were no restrictions on being able to undertake, your distance running within, a radius at particular times. But for the most part, yes, it was unfortunate that occurred, but at the same time, it didn't really impact my ability to undertake the sport too much.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you started at Health Focus, physiotherapy, and you've met your now partner there. Did you meet her there?
No, I'm a little bit embarrassed to tell this story, but I met Bronte in 2016 on the dance floor at Paddy's, so there's another local connection. Where only good things happen on the Paddy's dance floor. So yeah, we've been together for a long time now, 7 years now. But Bronce is also a physio, much more intelligent physiotherapist than me. She's very, very good. But yeah, working at Health Focus and Mick and Simone and the team there have been amazing with my training and, going away for races, etc. So yeah, I really enjoy working there. I get to see a good caseload, including runners, which is awesome. But yeah, they've been super, super supportive, which is really good.
All right. Now we get to the thing that I've been dying to talk to you about for ages, and that is Narrowcan Hill, because I love Narrowcan Hill Run.
Yeah.
I've never done it. I've got no intention of doing it, but I've been there over many years for media work, basically. And every time I'm amazed by how incredible you runners are, especially doing it in the time that you do. So you've won it 3 years in a row. Pat Scammell, who you mentioned earlier, local legend, he's done it won it 6 times.
Yep.
So talk me through what you love about Narrowcan, and do you reckon you can beat the 6?
Oh, geez, that's... I don't know if I can beat the 6, but what I love about Narrowcan, a whole array of things. I think first and foremost, the history behind the event, the fact that it just started with a few blokes running the range and they called it a race, to now, although the last couple of years in terms of overall participation numbers have been down, but and that probably ties to the difficulty of the event as well. It's not your standard fun run. Everyone tends to gravitate towards the easy sort of 10K fun run versus something like Nail Can Hill. But the challenge of it is probably something that I really adore. As you've mentioned, it is a tough course. There's some brutal climbs and some really difficult downhills to descend. But yeah, the history attached to it, the fact that the race record is held by Steve Moneghetti, who you mentioned earlier, probably our at least our most famous, if not our best, distance runner ever. And then the likes of Pat Scammell, another Olympian, Ben Buckingham, Jack Rayner, these guys have all won the event. So there's a lot of prestige that's held at the upper end of the event. And to now have my name on that big trophy that's in my lounge room at the moment, 3 times in a row, is something that's pretty special to me.
Oh, it's awesome. So your fastest time was 37 minutes 45 seconds.
Yep.
Steve's time was 34 minutes 57, but it has changed slightly in that time.
Yep.
So will that record ever be beaten, do you think, or is it impossible?
I don't think it's impossible, but it would take a generational athlete to come and beat it. 2018, before I was running, Jack Rayner came and ran, and I think he ran a low 36-minute time on the new course. People are arguing that the new course is slower than the old one was. The old one, you've got a little bit more road and a bit more net downhill. However, if Jack Rayner came and he was still, a minute and a smidge slower than Steve, and a few weeks later he won the Commonwealth Half Marathon gold, and he ran 61 minutes, it just shows how strong of a run it was by Steve back in 2003.
Yeah. And then to come back in 2019.
Yeah, I wish I was there.
Do you look up to... who is the runner that you look up to? Is it Steve?
Steve's resume probably speaks for itself. It's probably harder for me to look up to someone like Steve because he was a professional athlete. That was his job. Whereas I probably resonate with those that are still working and slaving away at their training. For me, a good one is a guy named Andy Buchanan, who is he's a teacher in Bendigo who I've done a lot of running with, particularly this year. And he's competed at the Commonwealth Games. He's training at the moment to try and make the Paris Olympics next year, and he's still working as a teacher. So I resonate probably more with those that continue to work and train at the same time, because it's a similar situation to myself. That's probably at the elite level, but I like guys and I look up to people who are just willing to get the best out of themselves. So some local guys, Ash, my coach, he's a phenomenal trainer and has done some really good races over the years. And even guys, there's another local guy named Jack Davis who just puts in the work day in and day out, who you look up to and you take away from. They may not be trying to emulate myself and reach, the absolute potential that I've got, but they're trying their best, and that's something that I, draw inspiration from for sure.
Yeah. So at 28, if you were playing footy, in the AFL, that's the latter phase. That's almost the kind of autumn of the career at 28. But we know long distance running, you can keep going and going and going. You don't have to look at Steve Moneghetti, who won Nail Can in his late 50s. Mm-hmm. So where's next for you? Like, what could you actually make a career out of it? Do you think that's a possibility? Full-time career?
Probably not a full-time career. I could definitely, and it's probably dependent on how well Berlin Marathon goes, which will shape what sort of the next 12 to 18 months look like in terms of, whether to take a little bit more time away from work and spend more time training. The goal for me at the end of the day is just to get the absolute best out of myself. I know there's a lot of the ceiling for me to reach my potential. I don't think I could make a full-time career out of it. You can run really, really well, particularly over the marathon, into your late 30s, early 40s. We're seeing that with some of the Australian women that are coming through now. Sinead Diver broke the Australian marathon record as a 41-year-old mother of 2 last year. And it just comes back to training and building that consistent load over a period of time.
So what about the human body in particular makes it easier to compete at a high level as you get older? Because you'd never see a 40-year-old sprinter. Like a 100-metre sprint, it would always be, I would imagine, a younger person's game. What about the long distance?
So it's a combination of conditioning of not only the musculoskeletal system, but also through your cardiovascular system. So if you're able to spend a long period of time building up the endurance within your muscles, but also through your heart and your lungs, it just holds you in good stead to be able to improve your VO2 max, and you're able to run at a faster speed for a longer period of time. It just is one of those things where you can't just go into the gym for 6 weeks and build up your biceps so you look good for summer. It's a thing that takes years and years of training. So the really good marathoners are always in their early to mid 30s, and they would have been running, really high mileage probably since their early 20s. My training age, given that I was late to the sport, is probably only at 4 or 5 years now. So the ability for me to improve as long as I stay injury free is, I'm probably looking at reaching my peak within sort of the probably next 4 to 5 years in terms of a training age, and then you can hold that for probably 4 to 5 years as well.
Yeah. So does the future look like you working in physiotherapy, which is a perfect area for you, and kind of dovetailing that with going to select marathons and events like NailCan? Is that how it looks?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'll always try and support the local events such as NailCan, the city to city and that sort of thing. But really, with a marathon, you can probably run 2 good marathons a year. And whether that's one in Australia and then one overseas, that tends to probably be a trend that I would look to partake in over the next couple of years. But really, it's just about training and picking out sort of 2 road marathons that you're going to have a real good crack for or a crack at. And I'll just tie that into work. I mean, work have been really generous in allowing me to shift my hours around to ensure that I can get good training in. So the last few weeks of this marathon block, I've been able to have a Friday off. I have to work longer hours on the other 4 days, but it just means that I can train a little bit easier and make sure I can recover okay. And depending on how well Berlin goes would be how I shape my time running moving forward.
Yeah. For those who potentially are just starting to do a bit of running, what advice would you give them? Because as you were saying, it's as much, if not slightly more, mental than physical. Yeah. So what would you say to those people?
I think the first thing I would say is you don't compare yourself to anyone else, and you would start your easy runs being easy. People like running because it's a physical challenge and you can get back to the door within 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, and you can give yourself a good shakeout and know that you've done a workout. But if you actually want to progress as a distance runner and get the aerobic gains, you have to make sure you're working within the correct zones. So running your easy runs easy and not comparing yourself to other people are probably the 2 tips that I would give those that are just starting out.
Yeah. Well, it's been terrific learning about your journey, and it's the kind of half or quarter journey in a lot of ways, because I feel like there's so many more achievements to come for you. Before we finish up, I'm going to quick fire some questions for you. Okay. If you're able to invite 3 people to your dinner party, who are they? And if one of them isn't Steve Monaghetti, I'll be disappointed. Nah, I'm just joking. Who are the 3?
Well, I'd replace Steve Monaghetti with a Kenyan runner named Eliud Kipchoge, who I mean, he's the bee's knees in the marathon running world at the moment. So he would be probably my runner of choice. AFL footballer Chris Judd was a childhood hero of mine growing up, so I'd have to have Chris Judd. And just to round out, and he's a very intelligent man as well, so it would be good conversations. And just to round out the table, it's hard, but I'd probably pick another intelligent man named Jordan Peterson, who's a clinical psychologist from Canada, who has some interesting point of views. I'd like to pick his brain a little bit, but they would be the 3.
Yeah, nice. Sweet or savoury?
Sweet. I'm a runner. I'm a long distance runner. It's got to be sweet.
It's got to be, hasn't it, for the carbs? Yeah, I get it. I get it. And look, what are your plans for the week? Oh, actually, no. Before you go, because I was going to ask, what are your plans for the weekend? But I'm going to say I know what your plans are. It's running. Yeah. Because I went onto your Strava, and I'm pretty sure this is accurate. So far, you've run 285 kilometres this month.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, that probably would be about right.
And last month you ran 700 kilometres.
Yeah, that'd be about right.
So you'll be running. this weekend.
I will be running, but I fly out to Germany on Wednesday. So
it's right around the corner, the Berlin Marathon.
Yeah, Berlin Marathon's next Sunday. So I'm heavy into a taper. So I won't be running. I'll be running over the weekend both days, and I run every day, sometimes twice. But it will be a pretty chilled out weekend pack the bags before we fly out on Wednesday.
Yeah, God, that must be so exciting.
Super pumped.
Never been to Germany?
I have been to Germany before, but for different activities to what will be entailed on Sunday.
Oktoberfest?
Yeah, well, we're going to Oktoberfest after the marathon this time, which will be good. But the next sort of 10 days is purely focused on the marathon, and then once that's done, we've got a few weeks over there, so we'll enjoy ourselves.
Yeah, well, good luck with it.
Thank you.
I can't wait to find out how you went, and you'll be doing Nailcan again next year?
Yeah, of course, I'll be there.
Yep.
I'll be there.
Oh, got to get the 4 and then just keep racking them up. Patty Stow, thank you so much for sharing your journey, mate. It's been absolutely terrific talking to you, and good luck with your running and your physiotherapy in the future.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Cheers.